Listen carefully. This is not an ordinary moment, and this is not an ordinary word. Something has been stirring in the unseen. Something has been moving quietly while the world slept, and now the whisper has become a command. God said, prepare for tonight, not tomorrow, not someday in the distant future, not when conditions are perfect or when fear loosens its grip. Tonight, this very moment is charged with purpose. Heaven is not waiting for you to feel ready. It is calling you to become ready. There are moments when time folds in on itself, when the eternal presses against the present, and when one night can carry the weight of an entire lifetime. This is such a moment. And if you listen with your spirit and not merely with your ears, you will sense the urgency, the gravity, and the mercy hidden within that command. God never speaks carelessly. When God speaks, worlds shift, destinies realign, and what once seemed immovable begins to tremble. When God says prepare, it means something is already on the way. Preparation is not fear, it is faith in motion. Preparation is the evidence that you believe God enough to rearrange your life. Many people say they believe, but belief that never moves your hands, your thoughts, and your choices is only an idea, not faith. God is speaking now because something is converging. Tonight is not defined by the clock on the wall, but by the moment of obedience in your heart. There are doors that only open at night, revelations that only come when everything else grows quiet, and transformations that require you to step away from the noise and face God alone. You may wonder why tonight matters so much. You may think your life looks ordinary, burdened by routine, weighed down by unanswered prayers, shaped by disappointments that refuse to let go. But God does not measure nights the way humans do. God measures nights by readiness, by surrender, by hunger. Some of the greatest shifts in history began in the silence of a night when one person dared to believe that God was speaking directly to them. God is not speaking to the crowd right now. God is speaking to you. This word is personal, intentional, and precise. Prepare does not mean panic. Prepare does not mean strive. Prepare means align yourself with what God is about to release. Preparation begins in the inner world before it ever appears in the outer world. God is not asking you to rearrange furniture or change addresses. God is asking you to rearrange priorities. Tonight is an invitation to examine what you have allowed to occupy the center of your life. Fear has been loud, but fear is not your master. Doubt has been persuasive, but doubt is not your authority. God alone holds authority over your life, your future, and your breath. When God says prepare, God is calling you back to order, back to clarity, back to the truth that you were never meant to drift aimlessly through existence. You were designed for alignment, and alignment begins when you listen without arguing. Many people miss divine moments because they expect God to speak in familiar ways. They wait for comfort when God is calling for courage. They wait for reassurance when God is calling for obedience. Tonight is not about comfort, it is about readiness. Comfort can come later. Tonight is about positioning your heart so that when God moves, you are not distracted, delayed, or divided. There is a difference between being busy and being prepared. You can fill your hours with activity and still be completely unready for what God is about to do. Preparation requires stillness, honesty, and humility. It requires you to admit that you do not control everything, that your strength has limits, and that your wisdom is incomplete. God is not intimidated by your weakness. God is drawn to honesty. When you prepare, you are not pretending to be strong. You are acknowledging that God is strong. Tonight is not about proving yourself. It is about yielding yourself. Yielding is not surrender to defeat. It is surrender to purpose. When you yield to God, you are not losing yourself. You are discovering who you were always meant to be. There are layers of identity that cannot be accessed until you let go of who you think you must be in order to be accepted, admired, or safe. God is calling you beyond appearances and into essence. There are things you have been carrying that were never meant to travel with you into the next season. Resentments that feel justified. regrets that replay endlessly, expectations that were shaped by others rather than by God. These weights slow preparation. God is not condemning you for carrying them. God is inviting you to release them. Tonight is not a night of accusation. It is a night of alignment. Alignment does not shame, it clarifies. When your life aligns with God's intention, clarity replaces confusion. Peace replaces restlessness. And courage replaces hesitation. You may feel unqualified, unsure, or even unworthy, but preparation is not about worthiness, it is about willingness. God has never waited for perfection before moving. God waits for openness. The door does not open because you deserve it. The door opens because God has decided that the time has come. Preparation is your response to divine timing. Timing is sacred. Missed timing leads to frustration, but embraced timing leads to fulfillment. Tonight is a moment of timing, and timing does not announce itself with noise. It whispers to those who are attentive. God sees the nights you cried without words, the nights you questioned without answers, the nights you lay awake wondering if your life had any lasting meaning. None of those nights were wasted. They were forming you, sharpening your awareness, deepening your capacity. Preparation often looks like waiting, but waiting with expectation is not passive, it is active trust. Trust grows when you choose to believe that God is working, even when you cannot see the work. Tonight is a threshold. On one side is what has been familiar, on the other side is what has been promised. Preparation determines whether you step forward or remain standing at the edge, full of questions but empty of movement. God is not rushed, but God is precise. When God says tonight, it means the conditions have aligned. What you learned through hardship, what you discovered through loss, what you cultivated through perseverance, all of it has been shaping you for this moment. Preparation is recognizing that your story has been leading somewhere. Nothing in your life has been random. Even the detours had purpose. Even the delays carried instruction. Tonight is when those scattered pieces begin to form a pattern. There is a sacred responsibility in being prepared. It means you take seriously the impact your life can have. God does not prepare you only for yourself. What God releases through you is meant to touch others, to restore hope, to awaken courage. Preparation is an act of love because it acknowledges that your obedience can become someone else's breakthrough. You may never see the full reach of your faithfulness, but God sees it clearly. God measures influence not by visibility, but by obedience. Do not underestimate the power of a prepared heart. A prepared heart is not easily shaken. It does not crumble at the first sign of resistance. Resistance does not mean you are wrong. Often it means you are moving in the right direction. God does not remove every obstacle. Sometimes God strengthens you to move through them. Preparation equips you to stand without bitterness, to move without fear, and to speak without hesitation. It roots you so deeply that external storms cannot uproot what God has planted. Tonight is also about expectation. Expectation is the atmosphere in which faith thrives. When you expect nothing, you receive little. When you expect something, you become attentive. When you expect God to move, you notice subtle shifts that others ignore. Expectation does not demand, it welcomes. It says, I am ready for whatever God chooses to do. Preparation without expectation becomes routine. Expectation without preparation becomes fantasy. Tonight calls for both steady preparation and vibrant expectation. God is not bound by your past decisions. Mistakes do not disqualify you unless you allow them to define you. Preparation is choosing to let God redefine you. Identity is not fixed by failure. It is shaped by surrender. God specializes in transformation that happens quietly but lasts permanently. Tonight may not come with fireworks or applause, but its impact can echo for years. Do not dismiss the subtle. The most profound changes often begin unnoticed. As you prepare, you may feel resistance from within. Old habits resist change. Familiar patterns cling tightly. But discomfort is not your enemy. Stagnation is. Preparation stretches you, and stretching can feel uncomfortable, but it prevents brittleness. A life that never stretches becomes fragile. God is inviting you into flexibility, resilience, and depth. Depth is developed when you allow God to question your assumptions and expand your vision. God is not asking you to figure everything out. Preparation does not require complete understanding. It requires trust. Trust is choosing to move forward with incomplete information because you believe in the character of God. Tonight is not a test of intelligence. It is a test of trust. Will you trust God enough to prepare even when the outcome is not fully visible? Will you trust that obedience today creates clarity tomorrow? There is a sacred exchange that happens in preparation. You release control and God releases peace. You release fear and God releases courage. You release self-reliance and God releases provision. This exchange is not transactional, it is relational. God is not a distant force issuing commands. God is present, attentive, and engaged. Preparation draws you into awareness of that presence. Awareness changes how you think, how you speak, and how you choose. Tonight is also a moment of decision. Indecision is subtle, but it drains energy. Preparation requires decisiveness. You do not have to decide everything. You have to decide one thing, to listen and respond. That single decision can redirect an entire life. Many people wait for certainty before they act, but certainty often follows obedience, not the other way around. Preparation is stepping forward even when certainty lags behind. God's voice is steady, not frantic. If you feel panic, it is not from God. Preparation carried by panic leads to exhaustion. Preparation carried by faith leads to strength. Faith does not deny challenges. It refuses to be dominated by them. Tonight, God is offering you a different posture, one of readiness without anxiety, alertness without fear, confidence without arrogance. There are things you have prayed for that require preparation you may not have anticipated. Blessings bring responsibility. Increase brings accountability. Influence brings scrutiny. God prepares you not to limit you, but to protect you. Protection is not always about shielding. Sometimes it is about strengthening. God prepares you so that what is given does not overwhelm you or distort you. Preparation preserves integrity. Integrity matters to God. It is alignment between what you believe and how you live. Preparation exposes areas where alignment has drifted. This exposure is not condemnation, it is invitation. Invitation to return to coherence, to let your inner convictions shape your outer actions. A prepared life is a coherent life. It is not perfect, but it is honest. Tonight may require you to forgive where you wanted to remember, to release where you wanted to hold on, to trust where you wanted to retreat. These choices are not small. They reshape the inner landscape of your life. Preparation often feels like subtraction before it feels like addition. God removes what no longer serves the purpose so that what remains can flourish. God's timing is not arbitrary. When God says tonight, it means delay would cost more than obedience. Delay often disguises itself as caution, but there is a difference between wisdom and avoidance. Preparation sharpens discernment so you can tell the difference. Discernment is not suspicion, it is clarity. It allows you to recognize what aligns with God and what distracts from God. As you prepare, do not compare your journey to others. Comparison erodes readiness. What God is doing in you is specific. Another person's path cannot validate or invalidate yours. Preparation is personal. It respects uniqueness. God does not mass-produce destinies. God shapes each life with intention. Tonight is about your response, not someone else's progress. You may feel small, but significance is not measured by size. Significance is measured by alignment. When you align with God, even small actions carry weight. Even quiet obedience can shift atmospheres. Preparation is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming clearer. Clarity amplifies impact. God is patient, but patience does not mean passivity. God's patience allows space for growth, but growth requires participation. Preparation is participation. It is saying, I am willing to be shaped. Shaping can feel uncomfortable because it challenges familiar contours. But what emerges is stronger, more resilient, more capable of carrying what God intends to place in your hands. Tonight is also a moment to guard your focus. Distraction is one of the most effective ways readiness is eroded. You do not have to eliminate everything. You have to prioritize what matters. Preparation sharpens focus. Focus simplifies decisions. Simplicity creates momentum. Momentum carries you forward when motivation fluctuates. God knows your limitations, and God accounts for them. Preparation does not mean ignoring limits. It means honoring them while trusting God to work within and beyond them. Rest is part of preparation. Silence is part of preparation. Reflection is part of preparation. These are not luxuries, they are necessities. A hurried spirit misses subtle guidance. Tonight invites you into awareness of the present moment. The present is where preparation happens. Regret keeps you anchored to the past. Anxiety pulls you toward the future. Preparation roots you in the now. God meets you now, not in yesterday's mistakes, not in tomorrow's worries, but in the present moment where choice is possible. As you prepare, remember that God's instructions are always aligned with God's character. They lead toward life, not depletion, toward freedom, not bondage, toward clarity, not confusion. If something diminishes your humanity, it is not from God. Preparation enhances life because it aligns you with the source of life. There is courage required to prepare because preparation implies expectation. Expectation makes you vulnerable to disappointment if misunderstood, but fear of disappointment. Intimate should never outweigh trust in God. Trust transforms vulnerability into strength. It allows you to remain open without becoming fragile. Tonight is a reminder that faith is lived one moment at a time. Preparation is not a single act. It is a posture of listening, responding, adjusting, and trusting. This posture does not end tonight, it begins tonight. What begins now can sustain you through seasons you have not yet imagined. God's presence is not confined to dramatic moments. It permeates ordinary ones. Preparation trains you to recognize God in the ordinary so that when extraordinary moments arrive, you are not overwhelmed. Familiarity with God's presence builds confidence. Confidence steadies you when change accelerates. As you prepare, speak honestly to God. Honesty is the language of relationship. Pretending distances you. Honesty draws you closer. God is not threatened by your questions. Questions asked in trust deepen understanding. Preparation welcomes questions without allowing them to become excuses for inaction. Tonight carries an invitation to renew commitment. Commitment is not about rigidity, it is about direction. It answers the question of where your life is headed. Preparation clarifies direction. It aligns intention with action. When direction is clear, obstacles become navigable. God's instruction to prepare is also an expression of care. It means God values what is coming enough to ensure you are ready to receive it. Value precedes preparation. God would not ask you to prepare for something insignificant. There is weight in this moment because there is weight in what is unfolding. You may not feel dramatic emotion, but prepare that. Ion does not depend on emotion. Emotion fluctuates, commitment endures. Preparation is sustained by conviction, not excitement. Conviction anchors you when feelings shift. God builds on conviction because it provides stability. Tonight is a threshold that invites courage without bravado, humility without shame, and faith without pretense. It invites you to stand as you are, attentive and willing. God does not require you to have all the answers. God requires you to listen and respond. As the night deepens, let distractions fall away. Let clarity rise. Let readiness take root. This is not a moment to rush past. It is a moment to inhabit fully. God is present, speaking, and inviting. Prepare your thoughts, prepare your intentions, prepare your trust. Let this night become a turning point where alignment replaces confusion, where readiness replaces hesitation, and where faith steps quietly but firmly into what God has already set in motion, carrying forward with an open heart, a steady spirit, and a life positioned to receive what unfolds as obedience continues into the unfolding hours ahead, where preparation becomes presence, and presence becomes movement within the purpose God is revealing even now as the silence listens back and the moment opens further into what has been waiting to arrive. Tonight is not merely an extension of the day you just lived. It is a sacred interval set apart by intention. God does not waste moments, and God does not speak without purpose. When God calls you to prepare, it is because something unseen is already moving toward manifestation. Preparation is the language of expectancy, and expectancy reshapes how you breathe, how you listen, how you stand. There are moments when God asks you to slow down, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is happening at once beneath the surface. This night carries that weight. It is heavy with meaning, filled with quiet authority, and saturated with divine attention. God knows how easily the human heart becomes distracted by urgency that is not sacred. Many things demand your attention, but not everything deserves your obedience. Preparation is the act of discerning the difference. It is learning to recognize the voice that calls you higher amid the noise that pulls you sideways. God's voice does not compete, it commands by clarity. When you hear it, something within you settles even as it rises. That is how you know it is God speaking. Not by fear, not by confusion, but by a steady summons that awakens courage. There is a discipline to preparation that is often misunderstood. People imagine preparation as accumulation, as adding more effort, more plans, more control. But divine preparation often begins with subtraction. God removes the illusions that have been propping you up. The illusion that you must understand everything before you obey. The illusion that you must be strong at all times. The illusion that your value is measured by how much you produce or how well you perform. Tonight, God invites you to lay these illusions down, not to diminish you, but to free you. Freedom is essential for what is coming. A constrained heart cannot carry expansive purpose. A divided mind cannot sustain clear direction. Preparation gathers your scattered attention and focuses it toward what matters most. God is not asking you to become someone else. God is asking you to become fully present as who you are meant to be. Presence is powerful. When you are present, you are available. When you are available, transformation becomes possible. God understands the fears that surface when preparation begins. Fear often arises not because danger is near, but because change is imminent. Change threatens familiarity, even when familiarity has been limiting. God does not belittle your fear, God reframes it. Fear can become reverence when directed toward God. It can sharpen awareness instead of dulling action. Preparation teaches you to redirect fear into focus. There is also a refining that occurs in preparation. Refining is not punishment, it is clarification. God refines intention so that action becomes purposeful. Motives matter. God looks beyond outcomes and examines the heart from which actions flow. Tonight is an opportunity to realign motives, to ask not only what you are doing, but why you are doing it. When motives align with God's purpose, effort becomes lighter and endurance becomes possible. God's wisdom often unfolds gradually. Preparation trains you to appreciate process without losing sight of promise. Process is not delay, it is development. What develops within you tonight may not be visible tomorrow, but it will influence every decision you make from this point forward. God is shaping perspective, not just circumstance. Perspective determines how you interpret what happens next. There are truths that can only be received in stillness. Stillness is not inactivity, it is attentive openness. God speaks most clearly when you stop rehearsing your worries and start listening beyond your thoughts. Preparation invites you into that still. Illness, not as escape, but as engagement. In stillness, you become aware of the deeper movements within your spirit, the subtle nudges that guide without force. God's guidance is rarely loud, but it is always consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust deepens obedience. Obedience strengthens alignment. Alignment creates flow. When your life flows with God's intention, resistance loses its power to exhaust you. Challenges may remain, but they no longer define you. Preparation places you in that flow. Tonight also carries a call to integrity that goes beyond outward behavior. Integrity is coherence between belief, intention, and action. God values integrity because it creates stability. A life rooted in integrity does not fracture under pressure. Preparation strengthens integrity by bringing hidden inconsistencies into awareness, not to shame you, but to heal you. Healing restores wholeness. Wholeness increases capacity. Capacity matters because what God entrusts requires room to breathe. Preparation expands that room. It stretches compassion, patience, and resilience. It teaches you to hold complexity without becoming overwhelmed. God does not simplify life by removing depth. God empowers you to navigate depth with wisdom. There is a sacred humility required in preparation. Humility is not self-neglect, it is accurate self-awareness. It acknowledges dependence on God without diminishing personal responsibility. Humility keeps you teachable. A teachable spirit remains flexible. Flexibility allows adaptation. Adaptation ensures continuity when circumstances shift. God's timing often confronts your expectations. You may have imagined a different sequence, a different path. A different outcome. Preparation helps you release rigid expectations so you can embrace divine timing. Timing is not about speed, it is about readiness. God prepares you not only for what is coming, but for how it will arrive. Tonight is an invitation to deepen trust beyond words. Trust becomes real when it influences decisions. It shapes how you respond to uncertainty, how you treat others, how you steward what you have been given. Preparation integrates trust into daily practice, making faith tangible rather than theoretical. God is attentive to the smallest movements of your heart. Nothing is overlooked. Even your quiet willingness matters. Even your silent surrender carries weight. Preparation honors these subtle acts of faith. God builds upon them patiently, steadily, faithfully. There is also a communal dimension to preparation. Even when it happens in solitude, what God develops within you contributes to a greater good. Your clarity can become someone else's guidance. Your steadiness can become someone else's anchor. Preparation recognizes your life is interconnected, that obedience has ripples beyond what you can see. God's presence tonight is not conditional on your performance. It is grounded in intention. Intention precedes action. Preparation aligns intention with purpose. Purpose gives direction. Direction gives meaning. Meaning sustains endurance. As you continue to prepare, notice where resistance arises. Resistance often reveals where growth is needed. Do not retreat from it. Approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask what it is protecting and whether that protection is still necessary. God invites you into mature discernment, not compliance. God's guidance respects your agency. Preparation does not erase choice, it clarifies it. You are invited, not coerced. Invitation carries dignity. God honors your freedom even while guiding your steps. Preparation is your response to that honor. Tonight also reminds you that faith is not static. It evolves as understanding deepens. Preparation welcomes evolution without abandoning foundation. God is constant even as your comprehension expands. This constancy provides security amid growth. There is a quiet joy embedded in preparation. It is the joy of anticipation without anxiety, of readiness without strain. This joy does not depend on outcomes. It arises from alignment. When you are aligned with God, joy becomes resilient. God's instruction to prepare is also an assurance that you are not alone. Guidance implies accompaniment. God does not send you forward without remaining present. Preparation heightens awareness of that presence, making you attentive to subtle reassurance and timely insight. As the night continues, allow your inner posture to settle into openness. Let go of urgency that is not sacred. Embrace attentiveness. Preparation is not about forcing transformation, it is about allowing it. Allowing requires trust. Trust invites movement. Movement unfolds purpose. God's purpose is not abstract. It is lived, embodied, practiced. Preparation bridges the gap between intention and expression. It turns belief into action, conviction into consistency. Consistency builds character. Character sustains calling. Tonight holds a convergence of past lessons and future possibilities. Preparation is the meeting point where memory informs wisdom and expectation fuels courage. God weaves these threads together with precision. Stay present to this moment. Listen beyond words. Attend to the quiet stirring within. Preparation is happening even now as awareness deepens and resolve steadies. God is faithful to complete what has begun, unfolding guidance with patience, strengthening resolve with clarity, and sustaining readiness as the night continues to open into what is being formed, shaped, and aligned within the attentive heart that remains open, grounded, and responsive as preparation continues to deepen without haste or conclusion, carrying forward into the unfolding moment with trust and attentiveness still alive within the silence. There is a sacred way to obedience that many misunderstand. Obedience is not loss of freedom. It is the discovery of true direction. God does not command to restrict you, but to position you. When God says prepare, it is because what is coming requires a certain posture of heart, a certain clarity of mind, a certain steadiness of spirit. Preparation is not about becoming rigid, it is about becoming responsive. A responsive spirit can move when God moves, pause when God pauses, and stand firm when pressure rises. God sees beyond the moment you are standing in. What feels like delay is often protection. What feels like silence is often instruction unfolding beneath the surface. Preparation sharpens your ability to perceive meaning where others see emptiness. God teaches you to read the night not as darkness, but as incubation. Seeds do not grow in noise. They grow in hidden places, under pressure, surrounded by stillness. Tonight is not barren, it is fertile. Many people pray for change without understanding the cost of change. Change demands internal realignment. God prepares you so that change does not fracture you. Without preparation, even good things can become burdens. God is careful with you. That care is expressed through instruction, through timing, through the quiet insistence to prepare before advancement. Advancement without preparation leads to collapse. Preparation without advancement leads to frustration. God brings both together in balance. There is also a sharpening of discernment that happens in this season. Discernment is the ability to distinguish between what is urgent and what is essential. God trains you to recognize subtle compromises that weaken strength over time. Not every opportunity is an assignment. Not every open door leads to purpose. Preparation refines your ability to say no without guilt and yes without fear. God is deeply invested in your inner stability. External success without internal stability becomes fragile. Preparation builds roots deeper than appearance. Roots are unseen, but they determine endurance. God strengthens roots before increasing visibility. This is why preparation often feels private, hidden from applause and recognition. What is built in secret sustains you in public. Tonight also calls you to examine where your confidence truly rests. Confidence rooted in circumstances collapses when circumstances change. Confidence rooted in God remains steady regardless of outcome. Preparation shifts confidence from what you can control to who God is. This shift is subtle but transformative. It frees you from constant self-evaluation and anchors you in trust. God's instruction to prepare is also an invitation to maturity. Maturity is not the absence of emotion, it is the ability to act wisely despite emotion. Preparation strengthens emotional awareness without allowing emotion to dictate direction. God honors emotion, but governs through wisdom. Wisdom grows through reflection, patience, and reverence. There is a quiet authority that emerges from preparation. It is not loud or forceful. It does not need to prove itself. Authority rooted in alignment carries weight without noise. When you speak from that place, your words carry clarity. When you act from that place, your choices carry impact. God develops this authority within you over time through consistent obedience rather than dramatic moments. Preparation also teaches you how to wait without becoming passive. Waiting with God is active trust. It involves attentiveness, adjustment, and expectation. God does not ask you to wait idly. God asks you to wait wisely. Wisdom listens. Wisdom observes. Wisdom responds at the right time. Preparation cultivates this wisdom. God understands the temptation to rush. Rushing often masquerades as faith, but true faith respects timing. God's timing is not designed to frustrate you, but to fortify you. Preparation fortifies patience, and patience preserves purpose. What is preserved can endure. Tonight may also surface unresolved questions. Questions are not threats to faith, they are invitations to deeper understanding. God is not unsettled by inquiry. Preparation creates space for honest questioning without allowing doubt to dominate. Doubt becomes destructive only when it replaces trust. God invites you to bring questions into relationship, not isolation. God's presence tonight is not distant or abstract. It is attentive, aware, and intentional. Preparation heightens sensitivity to that presence. You begin to notice guidance in unexpected places, insight in ordinary moments, reassurance in quiet thought. God communicates in ways that require attentiveness more than intensity. There is also a recalibration of desire that happens in preparation. Desires are shaped by what you focus on. God refines focus so that desire aligns with purpose. Aligned desire energizes action rather than scattering it. Preparation gathers desire into direction. God is not asking you to abandon ambition. God is redefining it. Ambition guided by ego exhausts. Ambition guided by purpose sustains. Preparation redirects ambition towards service, contribution, and meaning. Meaning outlasts achievement. Achievement without meaning feels hollow. God fills ambition with substance. Tonight is also about courage expressed quietly. Loud courage seeks validation. Quiet courage moves forward without applause. Preparation cultivates this quiet courage. It strengthens resolve that does not depend on recognition. God values this courage because it reflects trust rather than performance. God's instruction to prepare acknowledges that growth is ongoing. Growth does not end with one breakthrough. It unfolds through continued responsiveness. Preparation becomes a way of living, not a temporary phase. Living prepared means staying teachable, adaptable, and grounded. As preparation deepens, you may notice increased clarity about what no longer belongs in your life. This clarity is a gift. Release is not loss when it creates space for what aligns. God does not remove without intention. Ease makes room for something more fitting. God also prepares you to handle uncertainty without anxiety. Uncertainty is inevitable. Anxiety is optional. Preparation equips you to stand steady even when outcomes are unknown. God does not reveal everything at once, because trust grows through partial visibility. You learn to walk by guidance rather than by control. There is a strengthening of hope that occurs in preparation. Hope rooted in God does not deny difficulty, it transcends it. This hope becomes resilient, able to endure setbacks without surrendering vision. Preparation anchors hope in truth rather than circumstance. God's guidance tonight may feel gentle, but it carries authority. Do not mistake gentleness for weakness. God's gentleness invites rather than forces, but its impact is profound. Preparation responds to this gentleness with reverence. As you continue through this night, remain attentive to inner shifts. Preparation often unfolds quietly, reshaping attitudes, recalibrating priorities, refining perception. These shifts may not announce themselves, but they will influence everything that follows. God is faithful to guide those who remain open. Openness is not indecision, it is receptivity. Preparation keeps you receptive without becoming unstable. Stability and openness coexist when grounded in trust. This moment is not about completion, it is about alignment. Alignment sets direction. Direction sustains momentum. Momentum carries you forward into what God continues to unfold. As readiness deepens, awareness sharpens, and the heart remains responsive, attentive, and positioned within the ongoing movement of preparation that continues to shape perspective. Strengthen resolve, and hold space for what God is still unfolding within the quiet authority of this night that continues without closure or finality. There is a refining courage that God awakens when preparation deepens, a courage that does not shout but stands. This courage does not depend on certainty, it is anchored in trust. God does not promise ease, but God promises presence. Preparation tunes your awareness to that presence so that fear no longer dominates the conversation within you. When fear speaks, preparation teaches you to listen past it, to recognize that fear often exaggerates what it cannot control. God's voice brings proportion back to your perception. God is attentive to how you carry responsibility. Responsibility without surrender becomes heavy. Responsibility with trust becomes purposeful. Preparation teaches you to hold what is given without allowing it to define your worth. Your worth does not increase with achievement, nor decrease with struggle. God's valuation is constant. This constancy frees you to serve without striving and to prepare without pressure. Tonight also invites a recalibration of strength. Strength is often misunderstood as endurance without rest, persistence without pause, but God's strength operates through rhythm. There is a rhythm of action and reflection, of movement and stillness. Preparation helps you rediscover this rhythm. When you move in rhythm with God, fatigue loses its grip. Energy is renewed not by effort alone, but by alignment. God's instruction to prepare is deeply relational. It is not a distant directive, but an intimate invitation. God is inviting you into cooperation rather than compliance. Cooperation assumes relationship. Relationship deepens understanding. Understanding fosters confidence. Confidence steadies action. Preparation nurtures this entire sequence quietly and faithfully. There is also a purification of intention that happens as preparation continues. Intention answers the question of who you are becoming through what you do. God is less concerned with outward appearance than with inward formation. Preparation focuses on formation. It shapes character so that outcomes do not distort identity. When identity is secure, success does not inflate and failure does not devastate. God prepares you to handle silence as well as sound. Silence can feel uncomfortable because it removes distraction. But in silence, truth becomes audible. Preparation teaches you not to rush to fill silence with noise or activity. Silence becomes a teacher. It reveals hidden anxieties, unspoken hopes, and subtle guidance that noise obscures. Tonight, may also reveal the difference between control and stewardship. Control seeks dominance. Stewardship seeks faithfulness. God calls you to steward what is entrusted, not to control what is uncertain. Preparation clarifies this distinction. It releases you from the burden of managing outcomes and anchors you in the responsibility of faithfulness. God's wisdom often contradicts common assumptions. The world celebrates speed. God honors timing. The world rewards visibility. God values integrity. The world seeks certainty. God cultivates trust. Preparation reorients your values toward what endures rather than what impresses. Endurance requires depth. Depth is cultivated over time. There is a strengthening of resolve that emerges when preparatory on becomes consistent. Resolve is not stubbornness, it is clarity about direction. God does not demand relentless intensity. God invites steady commitment. Preparation builds this steadiness. It allows you to move forward without being swayed by every fluctuation in circumstance or opinion. God is attentive to how you interpret delay. Delay does not equal denial. Often it signals development. Preparation reframes delay as opportunity rather than obstacle. Opportunity to refine perspective, to strengthen patience, to deepen trust. God uses time intentionally. What matures slowly often lasts longer. Tonight also highlights the importance of attentiveness to inner language. The way you speak to yourself shapes how you respond to God. Preparation brings awareness to these inner narratives. God invites you to replace condemnation with compassion, despair with hope, self-reliance with trust. This internal shift transforms external behavior. God's guidance does not bypass your intellect, it engages it. Preparation encourages thoughtful reflection rather than impulsive reaction. Reflection creates space for wisdom. Wisdom integrates knowledge with reverence. Reverence keeps wisdom grounded. Grounded wisdom leads to wise action. There is also an invitation to embrace simplicity. Complexity often arises from divided priorities. God simplifies by clarifying what matters most. Preparation reduces unnecessary complexity, freeing energy for what aligns. Simplicity is not reduction of meaning, it is concentration of purpose. God prepares you to handle both affirmation and criticism with balance. Affirmation can inflate, criticism can deflate. Preparation stabilizes identity so that neither controls you. When identity is anchored in God, external opinions lose their power to define you. As preparation continues, you may sense an increasing awareness of responsibility beyond yourself. This awareness is not meant to burden you, but to expand compassion. God shapes hearts that are attentive to others without losing self-awareness. Preparation balances empathy with discernment. God's instruction to prepare is also an invitation to courageously confront avoidance. Avoidance often hides beneath busyness. Preparation exposes avoidance gently, inviting you to face what you have postponed. Facing does not mean solving everything at once. It means acknowledging truth. Acknowledgement opens the door to healing. There is a sacred patience woven into preparation. Patience is not passive endurance. It is active trust over time. God develops patience to sustain you through seasons where progress is subtle. Subtle progress accumulates into significant transformation. God's presence tonight remains steady even as emotions fluctuate. Preparation teaches you to anchor in presence rather than in feeling. Feelings inform but do not govern. God governs through truth. Truth steadies you when emotions shift. As this night continues, allow gratitude to surface. Gratitude recalibrates perception. It does not deny difficulty, it recognizes provision within it. Preparation nurtures gratitude because it acknowledges God's faithfulness across seasons. God's instruction to prepare affirms that your life is moving toward meaning. Meaning is not manufactured, it is revealed through alignment. Preparation aligns you with what is unfolding. Unfolding does not require force, it requires attentiveness. Remain open to adjustment. Adjustment is not failure, it is responsiveness. God guides through correction as well as confirmation. Preparation keeps you responsive without becoming reactive. This moment continues to invite you deeper into awareness, deeper into trust, deeper into readiness. God remains present, guiding without haste, shaping without force, inviting continued attentiveness as preparation unfolds within the quiet authority of the night, sustaining openness, strengthening resolve, and carrying forward into what continues to emerge without conclusion, as readiness remains alive and responsive within the ongoing movement of trust. Now let this truth settle deep within you. Preparation is not a suggestion, it is a sacred response. God has been speaking, not to overwhelm you, but to awaken you. This moment is not passing you by. It is standing before you, asking who you will be when the call becomes action. Do not treat this as mere inspiration. Let it become a decision. Let it become a turning of the heart. Let it become the moment you stop postponing obedience and start aligning your life with what God has already been stirring within you. Examine yourself honestly, not with harsh judgment, but with reverence. Ask what has been competing with God for your attention. Ask what fears have been shaping your choices. Ask where comfort has replaced conviction. This is not a call to guilt, it is a call to awakening. God is inviting you to live awake, to live intentionally, to live with a heart prepared rather than a soul distracted. What you choose to release now will determine what you are able to receive. Stand with courage and humility together. Do not wait until you feel strong. Move because God is strong. Do not wait till everything is clear. Step forward because God sees what you cannot. Preparation is your declaration that God's voice matters more than your doubts, that God's purpose matters more than your excuses, that God's timing matters more than your fear. Let tonight mark a sacred resolve. Decide that your life will no longer be led by reaction, but by reverence. Decide that your days will no longer be shaped by noise, but by listening. Decide that your future will no longer be postponed by hesitation, but positioned by obedience. Draw closer to God, not out of obligation, but out of desire. Walk with God not out of fear, but out of trust. Live before God not divided, but aligned. Carry this moment with you, not as emotion, but as conviction. Let it steady you when uncertainty comes. Let it anchor you when pressure rises. Let it remind you that God is present, guiding, preparing, and calling. You are not created to drift. You are created to respond. And as you respond with a prepared heart, a clear spirit, and a willing life, let everything within you rise to meet God with faith, readiness, and unwavering trust, standing fully awake, fully surrendered, and fully aligned in the quiet power of a life prepared before God.